Welcome to Fundamentals of Insurance, Chapter 4, the Insurance Process. In this section, we're going to talk a little bit about what's the process. What happens when an insurance policy gets written? Well, first off, an application is normally required. That's going to be your job as the broker. You're going to fill out that application, gleaning all the information you can from the insured who's sitting in front of you or on the phone. Now, the cost for those insurance policies is not going to be the same for every person, which I'm sure you've run across in your own insurance, either your home or your auto. So let's take a look at all the different people who are involved in the process. Number one is you, the agent or the broker. You act as the go-between between the client and the insurance company. Okay? You're not an actual party to the insurance contract. That contract is directly between the insured and the insurance company. You just act as the go-between. So you have actually a duty to both the insured and the insurer. If you fail to perform your duties or fail to send information through as you should or do anything that you're supposed to as to your legal responsibilities, that's going to be an errors and omissions claim. Okay, so let's look at your primary duty to insurers. Number one, you have to tell the truth, which I think is going to be easy for you. You basically have to forward on all the pertinent information that the insured is giving you directly to the insurance company. You can't withhold or conceal anything. Okay? Negligence and failure to exercise reasonable care, diligence, and judgment is going to be where an errors and omissions claim is going to come into effect. So the majority of errors and omissions claims can be avoided with consistent practices and procedures within your office, for example. I talked a little bit earlier in this course about documenting everything. That's going to be really important in avoiding an errors and omissions claim. Now, there are a number of different reasons why errors and omissions claims can happen. Could be you failed to provide proper coverages, you didn't discuss exclusions, for example, with the client. Maybe you placed coverage too late or you forgot to place coverage. There might be a mistake written into the policy. Just human errors. Sometimes that happens. It's going to be your job as the broker to avoid that as much as possible. Now, there are some other instances where there could be an errors and omissions exposure. For example, there's an error in describing the actual risk, or there's a cancellation notice that didn't get sent, or policy changes that are happening midterm are done incorrectly. There could be processing delays both at the insurance company end of things and at your end of things. And when I say agency agreement here on the slide, I'm really talking about your binding authority. So if you've bound coverage over and above what your binding authority is that's been given to you by the insurance company, potentially that could be an errors and omissions exposure for you. Now, the second person who comes into play here is the underwriter. So the underwriter is normally an employee of the insurance company. They're not required to be licensed because they're not actually dealing with the public per se. That's your job. So it's essential that you as the broker build up a really good relationship with that underwriter. They're going to be the person that you call when you have questions, when you need to ask for your binding authority to be increased, for example. So you need to have a good relationship with that person at the other end of the scope. Now, underwriters are going to look at hazards when they're underwriting a risk, okay? So what is a hazard? It's a condition which may cause a loss to occur. So there's two types of hazards here. There's physical hazards, which would be things that are going to influence the condition of the premises, for example. So type of construction, the occupancy, the housekeeping of an area. Now, when I say housekeeping, I don't mean did somebody bother to vacuum. What I'm really talking about here is the upkeep of the premises. So is the insured storing flammables next to the furnace? Did they bother to replace a railing that's damaged? That sort of thing. They're also going to look at moral hazards, and that's going to be a little bit more subjective. So they're going to be looking at the character of the applicant, their financial condition, moral character. Are they indifferent to loss, for example? So those are all the things that are going to fall under those categories. Now, underwriters are making the best decisions that they can for the insurance company. Namely, they're looking to write the business that's not going to have a loss if possible. So that's what they're trying to glean, is the They're trying to write as much business as they can that's not going to have a loss. So they have a few options here. They can either say they're not going to write business, which would be rejecting the risk. Okay. They can decide to write the business as it's presented. So whatever you put on the application form and the underwriters decided, yeah, we're going to go ahead with that, no problem. They might decide to take on that insurance risk but charge a little bit more premium. Or they might add on some conditions. So they might say, well, the deductible needs to be higher, or we're going to offer this in the condition that they have an alarm system per se. So the underwriter is the person who decides all of that. The next person in the process is the claims adjuster. Okay, the claims adjuster comes into play obviously after there's been a claim. So the insurance company either can have claims adjusters that work directly for them, or they can delegate out those adjusting responsibilities to an independent adjuster. Now the claims adjuster is going to come into direct contact with the client after a claim, and they're going to go through the process of adjusting the loss. And what that really means is deciding what the value of the property that's damaged is and walking the client through the process of the claim. What documentation needs to be filed, what's going to happen, issuing settlement, that sort of thing. And that concludes Chapter 4.